how do I maximize like showing the best of humanity? And I think my work historically has been these beautiful adventure, nature, environmental films. There's an endless amount of ways to like show that and show like why humans are good and positive, joyful, wholesome, empathetic people, and like the beauty and the hope and the joy. And that is always what like really inspires me and I come back to in everything.
Today's guest is an Emmy-nominated filmmaker who specializes in outdoor branded and commercial content. He's a specialist in the outdoor filmmaking industry and can handle almost all terrains and conditions. He's most known for his two works, Unseen Peaks and The Revenge. Unseen Peaks follows a blind athlete who doesn't let her condition affect her passion to ice climb and ski, while The Revenge is a short documentary that captures the spirit of the world's most secretive ultramarathon, the Barkley Marathon. Roo Smith will be joining me today to discuss his specialty of filmmaking in the outdoors. Roo, I'm super curious to know, so before you became a filmmaker, you were on the road to become a diplomat. I'm very curious to know about your journey as a filmmaker and how you became one.
That's a good question. First off, I'm super excited to be here. It's always fun chatting with fellow filmmakers and learning about the filmmaking process and diving into it. But yeah, to answer your question, I started filmmaking through that diplomacy process. I was really interested in international affairs and international relations, and I grew up kind of with like a somewhat abnormal upbringing. I lived in Costa Rica for a little bit in middle and high school, and I did the last 2 years of my high school in Wales in the UK. That was where I like initially picked up a camera, was in Wales, just documenting like skateboarding with my friends or surfing with my friends. The surfing was kind of cold and kind of terrible sometimes, but it was like a very creative, fun, social environment for me, and I just like wanted to document that. And so yeah, this international upbringing kind of in my head meant, oh, I should go work in international relations. And for me, the most obvious way to do that was like going to do it through diplomacy. I'm like, I love people, love interacting with people. And so studied Arabic and studied Spanish and was kind of on that path to do, these international relations related jobs. And kind of at a crossroads of like, okay, do I, get shipped overseas and go do this, international relations thing, or do I kind of take a gamble on this filmmaking thing that I'd been doing at that point for like 4 years, kind of just part-time in college, making some wedding videos, making some promo videos for some small outdoor companies. And I kind of just took the leap into filmmaking and yeah, haven't really looked back. But I think a lot of the skills I learned like in this international relations world of like interacting with different types of people, connecting with people of various backgrounds, trying to find ways to like empathetically interact with people is like, I think so core to the filmmaking experience. So yeah, regardless of how you get into filmmaking, I think it's always really interesting because no matter what you're doing in life, like you're building some sort of skill or you're growing in some sort of way. And I think you can carry that into whatever your next passion is. And for me, like that passion became filmmaking.
What do you think gave you the courage when you hit that crossroads to embark on the road to filmmaking?
I think for me, like I had all these technical skills that I felt confident in. Like I knew how to do all of the technical sides of filmmaking, and the business side of filmmaking I'd already kind of like warmed up to a little bit. And I was like, okay, do I take the leap and do the filmmaking world, or do I like, quote unquote safe and stick to the 9-to-5 world? And just kind of connecting those dots of like, okay, taking this leap, despite being like a quote unquote adventure filmmaker, like I'm pretty risk averse, which is pretty funny, but I'm very calculated in what I do in my life. And I make decisions in like the types of films that I make and the types of decisions that I make. And so taking the leap into filmmaking wasn't this like, I had $0 and I was going to buy a camera and just make it happen. Like for me, like I had a track record of like making films for 4 years throughout college. I worked as an intern in the communications department of my school. So it was like kind of making videos and gaining skills that by the time it was like, okay, let's replace this full-time income, it was about time to do it.
How did you market yourself early on? Because, you had the technical skills, you had the backbone, But then there's the advertising part of it. So you graduated college, you have some experience, but you're looking to make this your full-time thing. What were those early days like?
I am where I am now because I'm like, oh, sure, like I've won festivals and I've worked with big brands and I know how campaigns work. I've done them and like I know how film those like early years. I think just trying to like put in the idea of people's heads like I'm available to create videos that help you reach the goals of your business. I think a lot of filmmakers get very trapped in like the creative pursuit of like I want to make a film that tells a really interesting story, or I want to make a film that just visually like blows people away, or like sonic people away, or like whatever it is that draws you to the filmmaking process. It's easy to be like, I'm the best at this cinematography technique or whatever. But for me, the reality was like I wanted to people and to provide value to companies. And getting for myself was like, hey, I'm kind of an opportunity for your brand. I think for me, like ultimately it came to like, I'm here to provide value to these companies. And that was kind of the marketing I leaned into for myself because I think now, especially like so many people are making so many amazing videos. But for companies, especially for brands, especially in the outdoor space, like those videos may look really cool, but if they don't serve a purpose, it's kind of like a moot point. And I think for a lot of these brands, the filmmakers that they choose to work with are filmmakers that can show results of like, hey, this is what we've done to help other companies grow. We can do the same thing for you.
How do they see filmmakers adding value when creating branded documentaries or commercials?
Ultimately, especially now, like content is used to either provide like marketing value or brand value. For me, I typically fall on like the brand value. And the difference and maybe this is like the technical definition, maybe this isn't, but how I like to think about it is marketing is like, okay, we're using this film to like market a product and we're like trying to sell a specific product through this video. So maybe it's like a product video, maybe it's like a lifestyle video, very product focused, and it's trying to sell like a specific hat or shirt or ring or software. And then branding, less of like, we're here to sell a specific product and more to sell like the values of our company. So when we think of like Patagonia, think of like environmentally conscious brand. When we think of Nike, we think of a performance focused brand. And a lot of those branding values and branding voice can be communicated really efficiently and effectively through filmmaking. But I think being aware of like just marketing language and how videos get used and how companies grow and how it's easy as, artists or creatives to not necessarily understand the business side necessarily for ourselves, but especially for our companies that we work with. I think it's really important to kind of understand like what is a ROAS? What is the Facebook marketing? Like what does the Meta Ads Manager look like? Like how do you even go about uploading an ad for Meta? Maybe try it for yourself. So when your clients are talking about it, like this is how we're going to use it, maybe you can kind of understand what works and what doesn't.
Definitely. And you mentioned understanding a brand's values. What's your process of doing that? If you're talking with people, executives, managers, what's your process like of getting to the core of a brand's values?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I love this process. So for me, it's very easy because I'm just naturally like a very curious person. If someone's like, "Oh, I'm really into like making pizza right now," I'm like, "Tell me everything." Like that's so cool. And so I think when I have these conversations with brands, I kind of find myself like getting really passionate and excited about it because I'm like, "Wow, that's super interesting. Like, tell me more about that." But I kind of just run through like a whole list of questions like, yeah, what is important to your company? What does success to your company look like? Like sometimes in relation to this video, sometimes not. Sometimes a startup is like, hey, we're really excited about being acquired by a bigger company. Sometimes they're like, we're really excited about like the product that we're creating. Or sometimes they're like, we're just really excited about like being different, So everyone's answer is really different for, this kind of whole slew of questions that I pose. And I think ultimately, like the better you understand brands and I mean, kind of people too, the better you understand people, like the more you can connect with them. And so I think a huge mistake I made early in my career was just like not understanding how brands felt or needed to feel and just kind of been like, I'm going to make a cool video for you. And then kind of like having it not fit in with their brand. And I think I still will make that mistake every once in a while. But I think the more I know the brand and the more I'm building that relationship, the less often I make that mistake. And I think it's really intentional effort for me at this point, like upfront making that choice of like, hey, let's like go through everything. Are there values we shouldn't touch on? And there's certain values that are stronger for you than others. Is environmentalism more important than performance, or is performance more important than I don't know, whatever other things. So I think it's really interesting to have those conversations. And I think it's ultimately been really fun as a filmmaker because then you can kind of like branch out past your certain genres. Like for me, I'm very like on the surface, very like adventure heavy person. It's like, oh wow, he makes ski films and surf films and climbing films and mountain bike films and all of these like outdoor adventure sports. Where I have these conversations, the more I'm like, oh no, like I know I can make other types of films, and I do, but as I'm having these conversations with these companies beforehand to be like, we really care about like these like more soft, gentle family moments rather than these bigger adventures. But family being outside is really important to our brand. And so we want you to do it because you're kind of the outside, the outdoor lifestyle guy. So like we want that, but maybe it's a little less soft than like a Lost, but cares more about like the technical performance of something.
Totally. And you kind of mentioned how brands need to feel. That really stuck with me. How do you think brands should feel when they're talking with filmmakers? How do you nurture them?
I think ultimately, I think it just comes down to like comfort and collaboration. I think brands take a huge risk every time they hire a new filmmaker because films can perform really well for companies and sometimes films cannot perform really well for companies. And often filmmaking is a pretty heavy investment. Like films are tough to make. And so every time people like make a film, I'm like, I applaud you because that's like a crazy, it's tough. It's a tough process to go through because it might be a huge investment that might not pay off, or it might be a huge investment that pays off, or it might be a small investment. You know, there's a whole how it could work. But I think when you're a filmmaker and a brand, brands can really like build that trust with the filmmaker and like giving them thought out briefs of like, this is what our brand values are. I will go to your office. I'll spend a whole day in your office, just like meeting your team, walking around, having lunch, seeing the poster, all like what kind of music people listen to. I'm like, I just want to know everything about this because when it comes to maybe picking the music for the commercial or the documentary, like, oh, I know the marketing team all listens to Head in the Heart. So maybe let's do something a little more folky or like, I don't know. I think it's really like the more you can bring in filmmakers into the brand, like it's a more vulnerable, longer process. But I found that the more rewarding the storytelling and the more rewarding the relationship becomes.
Now, I'm also curious to know, Rue, you have extensive experience in adventure filmmaking. It's like watching your work on your portfolio, it's crazy how versatile you are. You're hiking with people, you're ice climbing, you're surfing. How did you choose the specialty and how did you develop the skill sets in order to match like the demands of adventure filmmaking over time?
Yeah, it's funny hearing you say all that because I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I do all of that. But it is, I think it's something for me, like personal, like adventure was always really important to me. Just going on hikes with friends or going climbing or going skiing and surfing and all that was just like personally always hobbies and interests of mine. And over time, seeing like the demand for it for work has just kind of like culminated in years and years of like developing these skills. Kind of for me it's felt somewhat passive other than skiing was like an active, I like had to actively do that one, but over time like it's just been this like kind of compounding effect where it's like, oh, I made like my first adventure documentary that I made was about a mountain guide who got his international mountain guiding certification. And so, in order to get your international mountain guiding certification, you have to guide on rock, ice, and snow, and like a whole variety of disciplines. And like, you have to be an expert across like a wide variety of disciplines. And so, in order to do that, I like had to film him ice climbing one day. And I'd like ice climbed like once on like a college trip or something, and it was fun. I really enjoyed it. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll do this again. And then you do it again. And then because I've done it now a few times, you then get asked to do it again. Or one of the subjects for a documentary is like, I ice climb. And you're like, cool. I guess I can ice climb now too, because I've done it just weird long enough. And like over time, like the more proficient you get at ice climbing, like, oh, the rope work's kind of similar to climbing or tree climbing or I don't know, like I swim a bunch and I've been surfing since I was a super young kid. And like now I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I can swim pretty far with my camera and like swim into these bigger waves. And then like the culminating experience is like, oh yeah, I guess now like after doing it for 10 years, like, yeah, I guess I can like ice climb and ski and do all these things. I feel bad saying this, but it's like quote unquote cool. It's like, oh wow, you do all of these, you know, variety of disciplines. I think for me, like it just really comes back to like, the coolest thing in filmmaking is what happens in front of the camera and not what happens behind the camera. And I think for me, like realizing that and understanding that, like, wow, all of these stories, all of these cool commercials, all these like amazing high-end fashion campaigns, like the thought behind the videos really is what's being put in front of the camera, not what's being done behind it. And I think with adventure, as well as with like, you know, biotech branded documentaries or high fashion commercials, like I think the most successful filmmakers are people that are willing to go places other people aren't, whether that be like creatively. And my instance, like it just happened to be physically. I'm like, I'm kind of willing to go places to put interesting things in front of my camera. And like sometimes that means I'm like sleeping on the ground and it's pouring rain and 85 mile an hour winds in Scotland, which like I just came back from a surfing trip to Scotland, which was like amazing, but a super unique, remote, wild place to go surfing. And that ended up being really interesting things that happen in front of my camera. But like whether you're doing that and putting yourself in an interesting place, or you're planning out a video to put interesting people in front of the camera, or you're editing and you have like some interesting character in front of your camera, but they're not necessarily doing adventurous things, like all those combined can like end up making a really amazing film. So for me, like I found that a way I can differentiate myself and tell interesting stories is like by putting myself in these interesting places. But ultimately for me, like it's what happens in front of the camera and like the emotion that happens in these wild places. I think that's one way I've really tried to think about like building these skill sets, because ultimately they're just skill sets. It's just like learning how to get better at running sound or running lights or using a gimbal. It's just like a way that I can help tell these stories in a better way.
With being worried about creating imperfect shots, to me, the whole process of filmmaking is also imperfect. I mean, we're trying to bring to light what we feel and what we see, and none of that is perfect. It seldom is. And you were mentioning, right? You do what very few people or no one is willing to do, right? Go to like traverse across various terrains, put yourself in extreme conditions. But you're also able to bring out the most of people, right? You're able to capture their passion, their emotion. And how do you maximize that when you're filming, directing, and editing?
Yeah, I mean, a very concrete way I do it, and this is like a little behind the scenes peek on how I make my films. I will literally like put on like different hats of like, okay, there's cinematographer Roo, there's editor Roo, and then there's director Roo. And all of those dudes, even though it's just me, like all of those roles are different people. And like when I'm out shooting, I'm trying to be a director as best I can. I will literally go through and leave notes for myself. Like now I'm wearing a director's hat again. And I'm like, okay, let's be director now and be like, oh, I don't like this cut. Like this scene doesn't make sense. We need subtitles here. Like kind of just piecing it together. And sometimes I'll go through like 2 to 3 times and kind of do that revision process. And I find that's a way I can kind of like remove myself from like the technical side and really focus on like, how do I tell these stories in the best way? Because a one-man team, I think sometimes tough to be like, oh, I'm doing everything and things can get really scattered. But I find if I can sort of like divide up the process and be as like, yeah, like soulful as I can and really just try to be as like human as I can. Like I'm an intuitively like very human, like a very emotion driven editor. So if you watch any of my films, like you might cry at like 3 more just because like that's it just is like the tendencies I go to as an editor. And then I'll export and leave my notes as a director and be like, this is like, this moment doesn't need to be emotional. This needs to be more like informative. And then you kind of go and you can change the edit a little bit. But yeah, it's just like one of those processes that I'm always trying to figure out, like, how do I be a better director? How do I share the heart of the human condition better? Because I think my films, like, even though they're adventurous on the surface, like they're ultimately about people and just showing like the best of humanity, I think. And what I'm trying to do, show the best of humanity.
And to me, it's really cool that you're able to have multiple hats on and still execute as a one-person team. I'm also curious to know, how do you hold yourself accountable when you're wearing these different hats? Like director Roo's making notes on editor Roo, and editor Roo has to do what director Roo wants to, but he might not want to at the same time, right? How do you hold yourself accountable in these roles? It must take a tremendous amount of discipline.
Yeah, I think something that I think I learned this a lot when I was like working in the government and doing like a 9 to 5 job was like, and this is something that I think a lot of in-house creators might relate to, but like even though I'm freelance and I work for myself and I make these films for brands and stuff, like creativity, I would love for creativity and I would love to be at the stage of my career again, which is where I was earlier when I was way less busy. But like, I would love to be at the stage where I'd only edit when I felt creative and I only like shot when I felt creative. But the reality is like, that's just so far from the case now. And I would love to just be like, I'm not going to work until Wednesday because I think I can just do some like outside stuff and then maybe get really inspired. Maybe Wednesday it'll hit. But I think for me, like creativity has almost felt like a muscle and something that I can like build, like almost like going to the creativity gym and just like, okay, every morning at 9 a.m., I'm going to go lift weights or I'm going to go swim or work out or run or climb or do whatever to like help my body be healthy and strong. Like, how do I help my creativity be healthy and strong? Just understanding, like, okay, every time I show up and try to make a film, like that's building my creativity muscle a little bit more.
And you mentioned kind of creating more structure around creativity. And creativity to me, it's the last thing that should have structure. Does it need structure? Yeah, I think it does. How have you learned to create structure around it over time? Were you always this way, or was this a skill that developed over time?
No, I definitely was not always this way. And even now, like I really struggle with people being like, "Oh, you're such an artist." I'm like, I really don't feel like it. Like I feel like I talk to a computer at 10. Yeah, I'm like, "Thanks so much. I love that you enjoyed the film." But man, the reality of this was me just like doing a lot of technical things, and like I'm making creative decisions along the way, but for me, like the process felt very technical. It's definitely creative and there are creative sections all throughout it, but I think for me, like understanding that a technical skill or like a technical process is something that whether or not you're feeling creative, you can go do that technical process. So for me, like beginning an edit is always like really intimidating. But if you're like, I'm gonna go back up my footage, I'm gonna import it into Premiere, I'm gonna put all my clips in a timeline, and I'm just gonna start pulling selects because like that needs to get done. You're at least like doing the task. And it's not necessarily a creative task, but it might get you in that creative process. And so sometimes for me, like the more I can just be like, okay, I'm just logging on to do it. This is just a technical thing. It isn't a big deal. I'm just like doing some stuff. Then I can be like, oh man, okay, this idea, the creativity can start flowing. And so I think just showing up and like, I don't know, there's this author who I forget who it was, but he was talking about how he'd write like 1,000 words a day. And, or maybe it's 2,000, I don't remember, but like at 1,000 or 2,000 or whatever the number was, he would stop. And so at 2,000 words, he'd stop writing for the day, even if he was like mid sentence, and pick up the next day and finish the sentence and keep going because it's a lot easier to start working when you're not at a blank page. And I think about that for me all the time. And that's why I have so many projects going at once is like I enjoy having multiple stages of the filmmaking process being completed because then I'm not starting at zero at any point. I'm just like, okay, I'm plugging in and I'm continuing selects today, or I'm plugging in and I'm doing sound design and I've already got the first minute, so might as well continue to do the rest. So yeah, I think that's also helped me in like giving me structure. But yeah, finding little ways to make it work has always been a way to like, I don't know. For me, I really want like longevity in this career. Like I want to be making films and campaigns and doing this kind of stuff for a long time. And like I don't know whether or not that happens to be in the adventure space to me, like doesn't necessarily matter. Like I am doing a little more fashion work these days and loving it. Like it's really creative and fun. And I think for me, if I can just continuously like show up and make videos and make films and grow and learn how to do it better and more empathetically with people and be more creative and put stuff out there, like ultimately, like that's just growing my fulfillment as a human being and my happiness, but also like growing the bank account, growing the career, growing the business, which I think for me has been a very fun way to like go about making an impact in my career.
Well, it's really cool that you're associating your growth in your career with happiness. One thing that improves your likelihood of being creative and getting into a creative flow is having the ability to focus. So even if you're hopping in and doing a technical task, and I'm speaking for myself, as I'm sure you nodding your head you can relate to as well, once you get into a flow, regardless of what that's on, the creativity starts happening, that focus state. However, some things are uniquely creative. Right? You need to have this like strike of lightning. What kind of things have you experienced that are purely creative and can't really involve other external things?
For me, you can learn technical skills, but it never feels technical, which I think is really cool. So like I just finished a film yesterday. It was like finally hit export and I'm like, wow, it's done. And like the whole last like 2 days or 3 days.
Congrats, by the way.
Thank you. It's always fun. Like, yeah, like I said in the earlier part of the podcast, finish a film. It's always an amazing feeling, regardless of what stage you're at. And yeah, it's about like a teenager, and she's got intellectual disabilities, and she's on the autism spectrum and ADHD. And I kind of follow her through her first season of training for the Special Olympics. So like going up and skiing with the team and doing all that kind of stuff. And I'm really excited for people to see the film because I think it's got a classic like Roo-esque feeling, which is like very wholesome, very touching, very, I don't know, a Netflix director I worked with one time called my work cute as like a compliment. He's like, your work's very cute. And I'm like, that totally is. It kind of is. It's got like this kind of wholesome tinge to it. Anyways, I like was going through this process of like making this film and I realized like, man, all of these like storytelling processes of like, okay, well, the opening, I always try in my films to create like a really strong opening. I call it like, people call it like world building. It's like, okay, where are we? Who are we? What are some lines that you can kind of like create to like build this like, okay, this is the world we're entering. And like one of my films was about tree climbing in Costa Rica. And the line at the beginning of the film was like, there aren't many rocks. Like we're in the Costa Rican jungle. There aren't many rocks around to be climbed. So we climb the trees. And like immediately from that one line, you're like, oh, I kind of get what this film's like going to be about. And that was just like, that never felt technical, like coming up with that line and doing that in the interview and figuring out like, how do we build this world? And so for me, like there's so many different parts of the storytelling process that are creative. But I think every time I get to that stage of the edit where it's like, okay, all the selects are pulled. I got some music that I can work with. Let's like dive into like, how do we tell? Like I got for this last film, it's 15 minutes and there are probably like 7 hours of interviews. Like paring that down and pulling selects is like crazy. But once it's there, you're like, let's tell this story, you know, and that's like a really fun creative process, I think.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, 7 hours revisiting the good, the bad, the ugly. How do you reflect as a filmmaker? What's your process of reflection and coming up with new ideas or reaffirming older ones or changing?
For me, about people and like the beauty and the hope and the joy. And that is always what like really inspires me and really I come back to in everything. And whether it's like a storytelling project or like a commercial project and I'm showing like the beauty and the joy in fashion, like that is something that I just always kind of get inspired by and always kind of feel like there's an endless amount of ways to like show that and show like why humans are good and positive, joyful, like wholesome, empathetic people. And so I think when it comes like finding new stories or new projects, like some come through brands, some come through being out in the community, and then I go to brands with it. Or there's a whole myriad of ways of how like projects get developed for me. But I don't know. Every person has a story, and like actually not the person to tell all of those stories, but there are some stories that I
Yeah.
specifically resonate with, and people that I resonate with that I'm like, okay, I think I'm the right person to tell this story. I think I'm the right person to like share this value or share these ethos of this brand or share this product in this specific way. And yeah, I think that's definitely something I come back to is like, how do I maximize like showing the best of humanity? And I think my work historically has been, that's like been through these beautiful adventure, nature, environmental films. But I think as I've developed and like, as I continue to look forward in my career, like taking characteristics and applying them to like different industries, it's just like such a joyful, big, colorful, like vibrant build in a lot of these like, I don't know, fashion brand industries. And so like I think potential in a lot of different ways to like show goodness and positivity in the world. And filmmaking is the way I choose to do that.
I want to keep probing you down that line. So you mentioned that you're kind of looking to expand and move towards new industries. So fashion being one of them. I also heard biotech. Can you talk to me a little bit more about how you see your past skill sets and experiences transitioning over?
I think it's really easy as filmmakers to get really pigeonholed and show like, oh, I make this type of film. So that's like the only type of film I'm capable for 10 plus years. That's 10 plus years of like taking my camera, importing, color grading it, sound designing it, whatever, exporting it and doing it again. And like, I am really excited to like almost like put myself back in the beginner shoes again. Not necessarily like scrap everything I know and like be a beginner, but I'm excited to like prove that I can do other things too. And like, I don't know, I've worked with a lot of stylists and hair and makeup artists, and that work may not always go straight onto my portfolio page, but I'm excited to show like I feel like a filmmaker, and I feel like I'm often looked at as an adventure filmmaker, but like I know how to light things, I know how to style things, I know how to direct crews of 10 to 20 people, and like I know how to bring these films to life. All these skills that I've provided for myself and like grown and cultivated over the years is something that then like, yeah, there's no reason that like high fashion companies don't want to make ski commercials, and I can film and ski and direct ski commercials. I've done it for years. And so like there's no reason I can't do it for a different industry, you know. So I don't know. I think that's just kind of a fun, exciting like way to for me to like just keep things fresh and keep things exciting and creative. You know, like in the outdoor industry, like there's a way that things work. And so people are like, hey, this works. Let's do it again. Like it works to make a documentary about an athlete doing their like in climbing. It works to make a documentary about an athlete that's pushing the grade of rock climbing and going harder and going bigger. Like we know that works. So let's do it again. And for me, I'm like, okay, well, that works, but I don't necessarily know if I'm always wanting to do that forever. And so for me, I'm like, okay, is there another industry that what works for them, or what do they know? What do they think works? But maybe there's some other new way that they're willing to try. I don't know. I just, maybe it's a little more existential, but I just feel like, I don't know, filmmaking is really exciting and people are doing creative stuff all the time. And I want to be a part of that like creativity and like pushing the limits of like what filmmaking can be. Cause I think, I don't know, I like making films where people walk away being like, wow, that impacted me in some way, positively or creatively or emotionally. And I think whether that's commercials, like, I don't know, we walk away from commercials being really inspired all the time. And like, I don't think that commercials are necessarily like a lesser art form than documentaries. And I think being primarily like historically, like, or maybe just like starting out in the documentary space, like, I think it's easy to be like, oh, like, I won this film festival and it's super artsy. I got nominated for this like documentary, like I got nominated, and like that's so artistic. And it's like, no, like when I look at commercials, I'm like, that is so artistic and creative. And like I wouldn't have never come up with that idea. But now I maybe am able to like use my brain and my skill sets in a different way. So yeah, it's exciting to like try to expand what we know is filmmaking and like just try new things and push ourselves creatively. And even at my stage, I'm like, you know, I'm still excited about doing that kind of stuff, keeping things fresh and interesting.
I'm curious to know, like, where do you think this curiosity and passion comes from, or desire?
Because I was like, oh, this is a way I can like make impact in the world and like give back to society. And for me, like I get really excited about all of this stuff because now there's so many people on screens all the time. I'm a part of it. We're on these
Yeah.
platforms to like get inspired and like, I don't know, learn about new things and try to escape a little bit from our lives, even if our lives are really good. Like, I don't know, one of my favorite shows is How I Met Your Mother. I don't live in New York City. I
That's
live
my
in
favorite show.
Colorado.
I love that show.
And it's because it's just like so different than my normal world. Like, I'm not, you know, like a 20 something in New York City, and I'm like married and like living the like domestic life in Colorado. And I think that like,
One thing to that too,
like escape, you know, oh, go for it.
one thing to that too, and to your style, it's wholesome, right? That's what makes it so appealing to me.
I don't know, people want to feel good. So I think for me, like I want my films and my career to give back to society as a way that people can then joy or experience hope or like, I don't know, I've made a lot of films in like the adaptive sports communities. And like, if you're an individual with like a physical or intellectual disability, like you can watch my films and be like, wow, like I can go skiing. I didn't realize that. But there are tons of like there are tons of like adaptive sports nonprofits that help people with physical and intellectual disabilities to go skiing. And you might not have been aware of that because you're like, oh, I'm in a wheelchair. I can never go skiing again. And it's like, no, you can. Here's a way, people are doing it, and here's a way to do it, you know? So I think for me, like, I just want to be in service to the world and the communities that I'm a part of. And I think, yeah, like I said, like filmmaking is just the way that I do that. And there's other ways that I try to do it through volunteering and being an active community member where I live. But I think filmmaking for me is like the way that I find that I can give this hope and joy and positivity to people all across the world. So that's kind of the way I like to think about the like ethos behind what I do, why I do what I do.
Well, that's worth a lot. I can't think of a better way to end this episode. Guys, Roo Smith. Thank you, Roo.
Been chatting with you. See ya.